This program is made possible by the loyal financial support of the friends and partners of Family Policy Institute.
You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world.
Good evening and welcome to Salt and Light. Tonight we're joined by a few experts on our panel and we're chatting about the Human Trafficking or Trafficking in Persons Act at the MeCaht conference in Cape Town. So, Mr. Joseph Mogoshane, you've worked with the development of the South African Trafficking in Persons Act. How did this process start?
The process in earnest started in 2010. Immediately we were awarded the bid to host the World Cup. That's when we anticipated the influx of foreigners, and obviously as a proactive measure, we had to come up with measures as to how we will be dealing with that. So basically, it started with the National Prosecuting Authority doing some researches and ensuring that we are up to scratch, and we were also helped by the International Office of Migrants, who were also helping us with capacitation, making sure that all the frontliners and everyone involved is trained and given the relevant information. And again, because of our ratification of Palermo, which is an international law, we were expected to come and domesticate the law in order to comply. As a result of that, we then started with the process of making sure that we have a domestic law which will deal with human trafficking. And in South Africa's context, it is called Trafficking in Persons Act, which is, in the correct term, is Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act, Act number 7 of 2013. As the legal process is always done, we start with the bill. There come a discussion document wherein we indicate what led to the act, and then the bill is then presented in Parliament before the houses. It is discussed, inputs are given, and then during the discussion there are portfolio committees that are involved in that regard. And then during those processes there are several meetings wherein the parliamentarians are indicated about the readiness of the departments in respect of doing their roles and responsibilities. Therefore, a couple of meetings took place, and prior to the bill being passed, there are all legal processes that needs to take place. We check the conditions and the circumstances in place to ensure that everything is in order. After the bill has been passed, then it goes through to checking the readiness of it to being assented by the President before it is passed into law. The act was assented to by the President in July in 2013, but only came into operation on the 9th of August 2015. This are some of the things that resulted into the delay is that there were some other outstanding issues that needs to be dealt with, that needed to ensure that implementation will be efficient and effective. So at the moment, the minister has signed the letters that are going to the other ministers, to ensure that they get the draft national policy framework, input in it, and then it will send back to him in terms of the act for him to approve. Thereafter, it will be tabled in Parliament as required by the act. And we hope that it will be tabled this year so that we may know our roles and responsibilities in regard to that.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Mogoshane. Mr. Lamento, as an international senior advocate and also former prosecutor of sex crimes, how would you assess the South African TIP Act?
Thank you for asking. It's great to be here this afternoon. I'm very impressed with what South Africa has passed, frankly. Comparing it to the Palermo Protocol, it has more teeth and more bite. unlike a lot of the human trafficking laws that you see throughout Europe, I live in the Czech Republic as an example, the punishment is between 5, 6, 7 years. Yours has 20 years life under the right circumstances. So overall, I'm impressed with that. I think it's great. Now we need action. Okay, so I'm the objective outsider. That's true, but my passion for women and children and men that are involved in this crime is as high as anybody in this room. So I think it's about action plans. It's about steps. Talk is cheap. We're here 9, 10 years. Been looking at this issue. Been focusing on it in Europe, throughout the world. We've got to move faster. We have lives at stake. So one thing that bothers me, though, is a contradictory law within South Africa, is this idea of 12 to 15-year-old children could have sex. It's a law that says they can do it. 16-year-olds, we know what it's like to be 16 years old, can have consensual sex with anyone over that age. That is a contradiction. So you have this great law, and you have contradictory laws like that are going to water it down or make it really more difficult to enforce from a prosecutor perspective. What do you think the criminal defendant's going to argue? They had consent. Even though the South African human trafficking law does say, like the Palermo Protocol, consent of the victim is not relevant. That's true. But judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys are still going to look at that issue because it's one of the ways you can beat the case, shall we say. And I think, again, I'm amazed by what you guys have created because, you guys include, one of the issues I love is you include forced marriages are included in that. That's not included in the Palermo Protocol. And I think it's great because you could add more exploitive kinds of conduct. Anything forced is going to be really thrown into that, but you have that category there. So it gives the prosecutor more teeth, more leverage. By the way, you also have debt bondage as one of those specifics. So I'm impressed. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much. On to Katie. Katie Modrau is from A21. She stands for Abolishing Slavery in the 21st Century. And as a leader in a civil society organization in South Africa, what can you say about the implementation of the TIP Act?
There's much that you can say. I think that I agree with you. I think the Act is incredible. I think it's got a lot of teeth. It's really putting power in the hands of our law enforcement and our prosecutors. It really makes room for civil society, and I love the fact that you acknowledge that civil society has an important role to play in implementation on the ground, because I believe that is the case. Where we are at the moment, let me use a few case examples to explain where we are. The parts of Department of Home Affairs that aren't enacted yet, or we aren't using yet, that really is crippling us on the ground at the moment. We are finding that we're working with cases of victims of trafficking, and we're kind of in the now of the law, but the not yet. So we have the law, but we can't use it fully yet because we have a foreign victim. All of her documentation is either completely illegal or completely expired, so she can't leave the safe house because DHA is not able or willing to help us yet with her documentation. So we can't move her case forward. She needs access to medical health, or he needs access to medical health, but he doesn't have documentation or anything from DHA or Department of Social Development to say that they are a certified victim of trafficking. So we really struggle then to get them access to healthcare because they are not from South Africa. So we're seeing these, we've got this great act, and when it's properly implemented, man, oh man, is it going to make a major difference. But in the now and the not yet, we're quite crippled working with the victims. Department of Social Development, I must say, has been fantastic. Specifically in Western Cape, working with them. They are on the ball, on the ground, really attend all the intersectoral meetings, which is great. So what that means is when a victim is rescued, we have great access to safe houses, and that's working really well. But then the certification process, or getting the letters of certification to say you're a victim of trafficking, nobody in the department can tell you how or where to do that. It's not really well specified, in my opinion, in the action plan of how exactly that's going to happen. It's written there, but no one really knows. So we say, okay, great, can we get a letter of certification? And no one really knows how to do that. So it's these things that need to be worked out in every department to make sure that us on the ground have easy access to these tools. For example, the letter of certification, the help from Department of Home Affairs. But can I just say, those are teething problems. I believe that those are teething problems, and that that is where the intersectoral meetings are so important, which Mr. Mogoshane spoke about. Every mandated department needs to attend it, as well as IOM and UNODC and civil society. It's at those meetings, they firstly need to be attended well by every government department, the same person every time, not someone who doesn't know what's going on, which sometimes we find with certain departments. Someone who's never heard of trafficking before arrives at the meeting, and then what can you do really? But if they are well attended, and then you can table issues, you can table cases, and you see real forward motion. We had a case recently of fishermen coming out of Cambodia. Was it Cambodia? No, forgive me, it was the Philippines. And we took that case straight to the intersectoral task team meeting. You should have seen the response we got from SAPS, from Health, Department of Health, enabled healthcare for all of them immediately. We got safe houses involved. It was incredible because we had an intersectoral, collaborative team effort, and we just saw the power that this act has when worked well with every department working together. So I have high hopes. I think it's not an easy way to implement it. We are crippled at the moment by Department of Home Affairs not coming to the table yet, completely crippled. And Department of Social Development is doing well, but really needs to get more organized in terms of how do we actually certify a victim of trafficking, which I think is quite closely linked to Department of Home Affairs. So yeah, that's where I would say we are. I hope that sums it up well.
That does. It's perfect. Thank you so much.
So we've got probably one of the most strictest penal codes, but the question is implementation and the evidence before the courts of an overburdened criminal justice system that's just not managing. Where you have your normal rape cases, you only have 1 in 9 rape cases is reported. And then your conviction rate of those is in single figures. It's about 6% of those that are reported. So we're not even getting to our serious murders and rape cases.
We're at the MeCaht conference, and I'm here with Steve Swart, who just spoke in some incredible information about the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Bill. You mentioned specific things regarding implementation. Could you talk more about that?
Well, one of the concerns is that there have been no prosecutions into organized crime syndicates in the first place, and we know that crime syndicates are behind a lot of the human trafficking that is taking place for commercial sex purposes. And we also are concerned that no prosecution has taken place for labor exploitation, where people have been trafficked for labor exploitation, whether on farms or whether in mines, and domestic workers. So those are aspects that we are definitely falling behind. We also notice that there's been an increase in the number of cases that have been reported. We saw in Lamento, for example, which is on the border, which is quite porous, we saw 250 cases of people that have been rescued almost, having been trafficked for various purposes. So there's a definite increase. We are also noticing, I mentioned the case of children that had been trafficked in a non-ventilated truck. This is absolutely disgraceful. So the arm of the law must come down very strongly on that. And I was just saying, why is our National Prosecuting Authority focusing so much attention on the Minister of Finance when there is human trafficking taking place that requires as much, if not more, attention, given the scourge that it creates in our society?
I think every country deals with the fact that I think probably why you don't see so much, or at least this push to go after organized crime cases is because they're the most expensive, most complex kinds of cases. They take years. Lots of evidence needs to be gathered, lots of resources. So it is my contention that you don't have to really go that direction. It is based on the fact of what resources your country has, but yes, it would be nice to focus on what we call these criminal enterprises. That's what organized crime is. What we see, though, is instead of looking at huge enterprises, the majority of human trafficking that you're seeing these days are just small satellite groups, 4 or 5 people that are running the show. And they're all interconnected sometimes, but not these huge organizations where there's like one godfather and like, 1 million people under him. There's just a bunch of satellite groups all doing this. It is my contention, because of the cost and the complexity of prosecuting an organized crime or a mafia kind of case, is look at other ways to go after the criminals. We don't always have to use the criminal law. We could use civil law. We could use forfeiture. We could use tax evasion. And we can use other kinds of laws to get the person off of the street and put them in prison. even if we can't prove human trafficking, even if we can't prove they're the godfather or the leader of a criminal enterprise. Again, I think that's why you don't see so much of a push, is because it's so expensive and so complex, and simply speaking, law enforcement and prosecution and the government does not have the resources to go after it. But let's be honest here, the criminals seem to have more money than our governments, and I think that's potentially true, looking at the numbers that we see in profits.
You've been involved in some pretty thinking outside the box on how to deal with organized crime. Could you tell us just a little bit about that?
Basically, when we started, we were part of the Mogale City Drug Committee, which is where we meet as different stakeholders to try and tackle the organized crime as well as the trafficking and drug abuse in the area. So we realized that in the years that we have been doing operations in the area, it wasn't working at all. So what we decided to do then as an organization, we decided to look for ways to eliminate not only the dealers in our communities, but the premises that they are using in the communities. So in May, when we had at the time closed about 3 drug houses, we decided that we will launch a campaign that we call X-Rated Drug Free House, where we identify the hotspots where drug trafficking and human trafficking is happening. Instead of us just going out there and rescuing, we instead close down those houses in the communities and also assist in restoring not only the beneficiaries, but also the traffickers themselves, because some of them have been trafficked into the country, and that is why they are doing crime freely and the way they do it, because they are also victims. So we also need to assist them, and in that regards, we as an organization partnered with the Nigerian Union. On the 14th, we launched a campaign with them that we're going to be collaborating together with them to fight the scourge of trafficking as well as drug trafficking in the country.
Wow, that's to me, when I was just listening to what you were sharing, it was just so amazing, and how brave you guys have been in, and how creative in being able to really take on some of the giants that are really fueling the sexual exploitation and exploitation in this country. So I just commend you, and I'm so thankful that you're here. I'm thankful for what you're doing, and just well done, and keep at it.
Thank you very much.
With me is Yvette, and you're in forensics. Explain, how does a forensic person land up at a trafficking conference?
Forensics has not only to do with blood and gore and DNA. There's so many different forensic fields, amongst other forensic toxicology, forensic handwriting and document examination, of which I'm an expert in. And all of these tools can help the investigating officers to identify certain leaders within groups, syndicate groups, and to identify where we can go. And then, of course, the main thing is now to do the cyber forensics. And so that's where forensic comes in.
It's incredible. And so you spoke at the conference. How was it received? What was the feedback like?
I think the main thing was people really thought about only trafficking, but they never thought what happens to the people that actually creates the trafficking. And so these people that are the perpetrators are now seeing what can we do about that. And it was absolutely, it opened their eyes, and I think it showed them a different view of what human trafficking is about.
And how did you get involved in this? What was your walk, and how did you become involved in all of this?
I've known Anne Abok from the Media or when she was still with the Media Village, and did a presentation there. And since then, I've kept in contact with her. I now serve on the board of directors for the MeCaht in South Africa, and so that's my involvement.
That's your involvement. And did God call you to this specifically?
Absolutely, absolutely. The things that happened to get me here, it was like a jigsaw puzzle. Every piece of puzzle just falls into place. And so here I am.
To me, it's so amazing that in the church we have such incredible people that are from all sorts of different walks of life. And you'd expect, we expect the people that are on the street, but there's other people involved as well, like yourself, that are involved in forensics. They're just incredible people that God has gifted, has raised up at a time such as this to bring an end to sexual exploitation. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to MeCaht 2016. This is the 3rd annual MeCaht conference, and we are speaking to Anne Abok, who is the International Director for MeCaht. Welcome to our show, Anne. As usual, it's a pleasure having you.
Always good to have you here too.
Okay, so Anne, And how, can you just tell us, for those who are hearing about MeCaht for the first time, just tell us a little bit about MeCaht, how it started.
So MeCaht is actually acronym for Media Campaign Against Human Trafficking. That is how it's registered in South Africa. In Nigeria, it's registered as Media Coalition and Awareness to Halt Trafficking. So it's the same acronym, but the meaning was just a bit different because of the registration status and stuff. But how did it start? You know, our heart has always been, when I say our, I mean my husband and I, we've always had the heart to use media to transform society. And so we look at issues in society and try to produce media materials that would address those issues with godly values, to kind of bring solutions, to bring God's mind and kingdom into those areas. And then in 2008, when I was doing my certification as a media trainer in the Netherlands with the Radio Netherlands Training Center, I came in contact for the second time with human trafficking. And it broke my heart because I saw girls from Nigeria in cubicles, in windows, selling their bodies. It was something I'd never seen in Nigeria. My first encounter with human trafficking was in 1999. I was in Togo. Togo is a country, a francophone country in West Africa. And I saw a case where 2 girls had been trafficked from Nigeria, from Benin City to Togo. So that was all I saw and that was all I knew. But I knew it didn't sit well with me. So I kind of put it somewhere, but it was there, you know, on the shelf. But in 2008, seeing face to face the girls actually selling their bodies, then I made a connection with what I saw. The 2 girls, teenage girls, who were fleeing from their madam, and the madam is the trafficker. Then I knew that we had to do something in terms of nation building, in terms of transformation of society, in terms of using the medium of film and video that God has given us to make a difference.
Which is such a powerful tool.
Yes, it's such a powerful tool. And Nigeria happens to be like the second largest film producing country in the world. You know, there's Hollywood, there's Bollywood, and there's Nollywood. So in terms of the quantity of films being produced, Nollywood is number 2 in the world. And the whole of Africa consumes Nigerian films. Actually, Nollywood films have successfully transported cultural identities into other African countries. And so I say to people, if you want to disciple Africa, you cannot do it without the media. So I had to fly back to Nigeria and say to our team, you know, that we have an issue of society that I really felt God was asking us to shine His light through His love and the use of the medium of film.
Hi, Denfon. So you've been to the MeCaht conference this year, and it's our 3rd annual conference. What did you think about it? What stood out for you?
I think this has been a great experience for me, attending the MeCaht conference this year. What stood out very much for me is the mobilization of churches to play a key role in addressing the issue of human trafficking and child prostitution.
Okay, and do you have any other, what is your involvement? Are you involved with any of the organizations or?
Yes, I'm involved in an organization in Zimbabwe called Zimbabwe Orphans Through Extended Hands, which basically deals with mobilizing churches to care for orphans within their communities.
Okay. Yeah, and have you found that you've encountered lots of cases of human trafficking?
Yes, it's something that we were ignoring as an organization and also as churches that we're working with. But through the learning experience that I have had through the conference, I've discovered that the church plays a #1 role in combating this problem.
So why did we decide to call it a resource line? Exactly what it says is it's a resource. It's not just a line that people can phone to report things or to ask for if it's a specific survivor that needs help. It's there so that anyone can use it as a tool. So we wanted it to be a resource for anyone that works with human trafficking. A service provider for all, but not just for organizations that work in trafficking, but also, as Advocate Mogoshane spoke about, the responsibility of individuals to report suspicious situations. This is an avenue for them to do that. it's there to be a guide on next steps. What we found is that sometimes, yes, all of these government departments and us as organizations have a responsibility to take action and to report incidents, but maybe we haven't been trained on how to screen whether it is a victim of trafficking or not. So the resource line is there so that it can be a guide on next steps. If someone walks in, you're in an area where you've never dealt with human trafficking before and you are so overwhelmed, because often when we do trainings with social workers, they'll say they're so intimidated when they hear the word human trafficking. They just want to run. They don't want to deal with the case. So the resource line is there to be a tool for them that they can go to get information on what the next step should be, how to do the screening, who should it be reported to, etc. So what we did is we partnered with 2 companies, Salesforce and Polaris. Now, I don't know how many of you have maybe heard of Polaris before. Okay, some of you, yeah. So Polaris, for those of you maybe don't know, they're an organization based in America, and they developed a national human trafficking resource center. And what they did is they realized how valuable it is when this intel gets taken in, but also that that intel needs to be analyzed and that it needs to lead to action. And so what they did is they took software developed by Salesforce and they customized it so that it is there for hotlines. And their vision is to kind of roll that out to different human trafficking hotlines all over the world so that we can effectively capture information that leads to action. So we partnered with them. They came and actually did training with our team of call specialists. So call specialists are like the operators, and we spent about a week with them training on the system and their protocols. So the protocols that we have put in place are based on international standards and procedures. So how does it work? So I'm quickly going to show you a little clip just to explain how Polaris developed the system and what it is able to do.
Polaris Project, we are a nonprofit organization that combats human trafficking and modern slavery through a comprehensive model of different programs. Our biggest program is the National Human Trafficking Hotline for the United States, which is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline for anyone in the country to call if they're a survivor and they want to try to get out of a situation, or if they're a community member and they want to report a tip. This is the national sort of 911 for human trafficking that we operate. So we've got staff awake at Polaris 24/7 taking these calls. Right now it's around 100 calls a day. And sometimes it's calls, sometimes it's text messages, sometimes it's emails, sometimes it's web forms. We're kind of multimodal. And every time someone reaches out to us, we're collecting information about how we can best respond to their case. So we now have these 95,000 case records, essentially, of these individual calls. Prior to us using Palantir, we were compiling all these case records, but we were creating these individual responses for each individual call. So almost imagine 95,000 individual responses. But now we're starting to say, we need to get beyond only responding to that one call. We need to start taking a step back and doing some link analysis between calls. Are we getting calls about the same trafficker? Are we getting calls about the same phone number? Are we getting calls about the same shady recruitment company that's responsible for recruiting workers into all these different industries? And so as we started to upload all of those 95,000 case records into Palantir and begin using Palantir as a data analysis tool, we began seeing all these amazing connections. In these 4 different calls, we're using different names, different addresses, but they were all actually using the same phone number linked to the same guy. And we wouldn't have ever been able to make those connections because we weren't doing that analysis. The power that we now have using tools like Palantir to actually to pack a punch against traffickers is just, it's just night and day. I think those of us who work on this every day honestly believe that we can end it. We're not in this to respond to it or to mitigate it or to kind of nibble around the edges. We're in it to end it. And I think that having tools like Palantir are a key part of that recipe.
So this will only be a success if all of us pull together to promote this and to get the number out there. And just like lastly, in terms of successes, between the 30th of August when we officially launched and the 21st of September, we had a total of 153 incoming calls. And since then, we've been able to assist on 5 rescues, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. And that, that was also, again, from people promoting the number and getting it out there. So, yeah, a lot of prevention has already taken place through people also just calling into the line and checking the validity, like Chantal mentioned, of certain situations or opportunities. So we really hope that through this resource, like the CEO of Polaris mentioned, that we'll be able to pack a punch to traffickers and end it.
Hi, Monica. So what do you think of the MeCaht conference? What was your feel about it, or what stood out for you?
Oh, amazing, eye-opening. We live in this Africa, in this South Africa, but we don't really know what's going on in our own country. I felt like my eyes, for the first time, were open, open, really, it was like mind-blowing for me. I felt like I needed to repent and ask God to forgive me,
For being a bit more or blinded before.
Yes. Blinded, being part of the local church, and the community, as a community builder, I felt like I've been living in this fantasy, and just being religious, but not really knowing what my country is going through, what people are facing as women,
Now, this is more for the primary schools. We want to give them a visual of what does it mean to be tricked. So we have these posters. I'm going to put the mic down. Berta, thank you. So we have these posters. So what we do is we go through each stage of trafficking so the kids can understand what it really entails and what makes this different than just a kidnapping or something like that. So this first picture is tricked. So in your manual, you guys will see it has a number 1. And it says the first person is tricked or fooled. And it explains, someone gives you a lot of promises, like I'll pay for your ticket, I'll pay for your passport, I'll buy your food, you'll be famous, all these things. And so we explain to them this is the first stage of trafficking, is you get tricked. And it can range from any different kind of trick, any kind of coercion, a lie, deception. Those are the ways that people get trafficked. So we show that. Then we show them the next step. So this is on the next page if you want to turn, page 8. The next step is trapped. So this is what we've been speaking about. So, Berta, that one. The one with the prison bars. Trapped, it says, under trapped, it says the victim is locked up alone or with other children and is watched all the time by a cruel person that they can't escape. At this point, the victim doesn't know the place where he or she is staying. They may not speak the language. They may be locked in a room and treated very badly. And if they don't obey, they're threatened. So this photo represents a jail cell. So they're stuck. There's no way out. They can't just come and go as they please. They're trapped some way, somehow. Whether it's through tricking in the sense of, what do you call, that's not the word. But when someone, a threat, when someone's threatening you, like whether they're threatening, like I threatened Berta's family, or I could threaten her and say, I'm not going to feed you. So not only am I going to kill your family and threaten them, I'm also not going to feed you and I'll beat you up if I feel like it. So that would be a way that someone could be trapped in this situation. But also not knowing the language, not having papers, because the traffickers will take their visas and will take their passports. Then what are they going to do? They can't just leave. So those are all different ways that they can be trapped. So you explain that to the kids. You give them situations of what could this mean. The next one, Berta, is that one. This one is traded, or you could say used. But we kind of use the T, so tricked, trapped, traded kind of sounds a little bit better. Or tricked, trapped, and used. So with this one, children are sold to people who touch them in a wrong way or who take naked pictures of them. Children are also sold to work very hard in homes or in factories, or to sell drugs, or to beg or steal against their will. Okay, so in this picture, we want to explain to them that this is where the sold part comes in, where they're being used, they're being taken advantage of, and they're being sold for their body. Most of the time it is for sex, but a lot of times it can also be like with labor trafficking where they don't get paid at all, or they get paid in peanuts, like literally barely anything. Yeah, so we show them, once we show them, thanks Berta, once we show them these 3 pictures, something you guys can do is you can actually tell a story and have someone like your partner, if Berta was my partner, as I'm telling the story, when the part comes up where she's tricked, she would hold up the photo. So the kids say, oh, this is where she's tricked. And then when she's trapped, they hold up the photo and say, oh, this is where she's trapped. And then the last one, this is where she's traded. So it gives them like a little visual so they can remember the 3 main points about what trafficking is. Nicole, how am I doing? 5 minutes. Okay, cool. All right. Okay, something I do, and I'm just going to share this with you guys because at the last school we went to at Renish, it's pretty cool because you'll find that a lot of the students will come up to you after and tell you stories. They'll say like, wow, Sam, you talked about this and I realized this happened to me, or this happened to my best friend, what do I do? Or I think I know someone who's a pimp, you know, and they start to put 2 and 2 together and realize like these things are happening. Something that I do is I talk to them about what it means to be vulnerable, because in high school, a lot of those girls are really, really, really vulnerable. And they don't realize that the traffickers can actually see that in them. It's this weird thing where they can look at you and say like, that's a good prey, like that's a good target. And usually those girls have been abused sexually or come from a broken home, or there was something in their past, a trauma, and that's something that happens. There's patterns that form. And these girls need to know, if that has happened to you, you need to know who you are. And we talked about that earlier, that these girls need to know that they're strong, that they're brave, that they're beautiful, that they're worth something, that they're valuable. So I always try and throw that in there because a lot of these girls don't realize it. And I always call them, the words that I use that the Lord gave me when I was younger was princess warrior. Like these girls are princess warriors. They're beautiful and royal and wonderful, but they're also strong and fierce, and they need to know that. And the way that they respect their own bodies and the way they dress and the way they carry themselves can actually protect them. And they don't know that that's true, but it is true. So we try and throw that in there so they see when I dress this way, people may look at me and it could either be bad or it could be good, you know? The way I treat my body, the way I respect myself, the way I respect my peers, it really makes a difference. So we share that with them. And then the last thing we always end with, we don't have a slide for the help number, right? Okay, we always end with the national helpline number. Now, depending on what country you're in, the number will be different. But for South Africa, we have a number. Berta will pull it up. Yeah, so we share this number with them. It's an 0800 number. It's like 222-777. So it's really easy. So what we do is I have them take out pens and papers and write it down, and then I have them memorize it. So I ask them to close their eyes. They repeat it, and then I ask them to do it with their hands. So then they do 777 222, and then I have them do it on their own without me helping. And by the end, that number is memorized, and they know it. And so whenever they're in a dangerous situation, they can say, oh, the help number, what was the help number? Okay, and they can call that number. And we tell them, this isn't a prank call number. Don't call it if you're mad at your mom because she wants you to clean your room. Don't call it if your boyfriend is just joking with you, being funny, it's a very serious thing, So we tell them, if you're in danger, you call this number. But if you're not, don't mess around with this. So we give them this number. We end with this. And then if there's time after, we let them ask questions. We do a little question-answer session. And that's pretty much it. So,
hi, Helen. So we spoke earlier today, and you were telling me a little bit about how you got involved with MeCaht and your role and where you're from. Can you just tell our audience?
Yes, I'm originally from Germany, but I've lived in Nigeria, in Abuja, the capital now, for a little bit more than a year. And I volunteer at a safe house that is run by MeCaht. The way how I got involved with the whole working with women in prostitution is quite funny because the first women on the streets that I met, or when the thing first popped up, was with Nigerian women in Spain. So I used to live and work there with a ministry called 24/7 Prayer. which was focusing on the clubbers. The island of Ibiza is famous for clubbing and partying, people from all over Europe. So we just recognized these women on the streets and how they were running from the police and hiding and like kind of in the corners, and just started to do research about them and started to talk to them and learn about where they come from and how they ended there.
When did it, hit home with you that it was actually a serious problem and that you actually got involved with the safe houses in Nigeria?
I just felt it like was put on my heart, I never chose I'm going to work with prostitutes. I just, it was just like an urge. And so wherever I lived after that, I carried on just volunteering in different ministries. And when we were going to move to Nigeria for my husband's job, actually, I just asked everyone I knew if they knew anything about a ministry in Nigeria. And that's how I came across Anne and Alex. Yeah.
You got in touch with Anne and got involved.
Exactly, yeah. So for me, Nigerians are where it started. And now I'm in Nigeria, which is totally crazy.
Okay, thank you so much for your comment, Ellen.
So I'm here at the MeCaht conference and we're talking to Gaby Wentland. How did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes, Wentland.
There you go.
Coming from Germany.
And you were involved with Reinhard Bonke. Explain a little bit about your ministry.
Reinhard Bonke Gospel Crusade, we were involved for 37 years. We traveled with him all over Africa. We were based in South Africa for 5 years, from 1980 to 85.
How you got into human trafficking. You were explaining how Christine Kane came to your church. Would you tell the audience about that?
Yes. Christine Kane was invited by me to Hamburg, to Germany, where I'm living right now. And I asked her to teach the pastors. And in the teaching of pastors, she shared about human trafficking and slavery. And I thought, she is nuts. This can never be. I have never heard about it. This was 2008. Sure. I was very upset, very angry, and I thought, what a stupid thing to think that we have slaves today. And then she told me something, and that changed my life. She said, Gaby, you need to investigate what is really happening in your city. So I went to the police, to the president of police in Hamburg, and I asked him, sir, is this true? And he said, yes, it's much worse. We have no numbers.
Wow.
And that really shocked me. And then it was like the Holy Spirit just touching my heart saying, Gaby, you need to do something about it. This is unrighteousness and we have to stand up. And this is how we started.
So, it's from small beginnings. How did that just sort of, it's escalated now. You speak all over the world. You've written this incredible book, By Life or By Death. Tell us a little bit more about this book. From what you were saying, I was thinking this is an incredible book. Could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes. Now, before I started with Mission Freedom, this organization to fight human trafficking, we traveled all over Africa preaching the gospel, and we encountered many difficult times. We had about 78 huge crises. My husband was 11 times dead or nearly dead.
Wow.
Doctors gave him up, said 1 hour to live, and then there's no more life in him. And every time God taught me how to raise my husband from the dead.
Wow.
And this was supernaturally. It's the easiest in the world to raise your spouse from the dead because you cannot do it. Sure. But when God says do it and it works, you know that God has the power to raise the dead. So that's what we encountered, and many, many healings. And we were trapped in rebel areas where the soldiers wanted to kill us. So all these stories are in our book, By Life or By Death. And Reinhard Bonke wrote an article for it as well. And you can buy it in South Africa. You can order it online in your internet.
And right now you guys run a safe house, and some of the stories you were sharing were just really so compelling. On the two sides. Firstly, the dark side of the relationship between like the porn and prostitution, you were sharing stories. And then you were also sharing stories of just how in simple things like buying clothes, new clothes for girls, how it was just absolutely transformed them. Could you tell our audience a little bit about that?
When I found out in 2008 that we have slaves in our city, I was actually confronted with some of the girls. And I met them, and I could ask questions, and then my tears started crying. I was just crying. I was thinking, if my two beautiful daughters that we have would be involved, what would I do? And that made all the difference in my life. And then I started to just visit other shelters and asked people, can I help? What can I do? And I found out, yes, we can all do something. And I could actually open a shelter. And so I did. I'm a pastor's wife, and we have the capacity of a church. And so you can open a shelter. A shelter is a house.
Yeah.
Rent a house. Train staff. And so we invited, people to come and help us, and then the girls arrived. And that changed all of our lives forever.
Wow.
One of the first girls that arrived, she came from India. She's one of those beautiful girls that you just look at and you're thinking, wow, everything's perfect on her. She was trafficked when she was 14 by her own mom. She was sold to an older man who brought her all the way to Germany. This man was in the porn industry. He never fed her. He gave her 1 bowl of rice a day so that she would stay skinny. And she had to prostitute herself plus be in the porn industry. And for her, it was horror to see her nakedness in the internet. And so she finally escaped. She came to a safe house of another organization. She was found by this guy because he was so clear to trace her. And finally she was brought to our safe house and she was safe. And then she shared her story, how embarrassed she is and how she feels that she feels naked because everybody can see her body every time. And then she received Jesus Christ into her heart. And that's the most miracle story you can ever experience. When a person that has lost hope in any person receives Jesus. Suddenly hope comes, joy comes, peace comes, and restoring back her dignity. And she made it. She made high school. She's now a chemical assistant in a huge company. She makes lots of money. She's soon a very successful young lady. She fell in love with a young engineer who proposed to her, and she told him her whole story. And he said, I can cope with it. I can live with it. If that's all that happened to you, I believe Jesus has forgiven and he has taken away your shame, and I'm waiting for you to be married to you. And so next year they're going to have a big wedding.
Wow. It's to me so amazing that when things of Reinhard Bonker's crusades, you think of these masses of people, and in many essences, you're an evangelist.
Yes.
You're going onto the street, you're rescuing people, not just taking care of their spiritual needs, but their physical needs as well, giving them a place of shelter, giving them a place of safety. You remember in the Old Testament where people were caught in injustice or in being in places where they kind of fell between the lines of justice. They had places that they could run to.
Amen.
And you guys provide that in such an incredible way. You also mentioned just about, just for our audience, you mentioned about the buying clothes. And I really would give me great, I think it would really be a blessing to people if you tell that story.
I had no training how to bring back a survivor into real life because they have lost everything. And so I felt so strongly to treat them like my own daughters. And if they come out of such a hazard, you need to give them something that they have joy. And what else is joy but for a young girl to do great shopping?
Right.
So I decided, instead of giving them clothes that are used out of a bag from a church, no, they need to go to a nice shop and they need to choose the nicest clothes they can find to dress themselves like a princess. So I go with them shopping right after they arrive. And I spend a lot of money on them just to dress them up from head to toes. And they will get a new jeans, a new pair of T-shirts, a new, sneakers and all those things you girls like. And I didn't realize what it transforms in their lives. They come home to the shelter and they will show everybody, look, I got a dress. It's $200 worth. Or it is jeans. They're brand new. They never had this. They never had a treatment like this. And so it transforms them. And what I find amazing, these girls that have been sometimes 10 years in prostitution never want to show off their bust or their body. They want to be dressed like a normal girl. They want to live like a normal girl, behave like a normal girl. So it changes not just their inner feelings, but also their outward.
You've also mentioned in this book, and this is a lot about, I think there are many believers that are involved in intense ministry like you are, that find themselves on the edge of burnout or find themselves really, really in the grip of fear. And it seems like because they've been around for a while and they should have gotten over it. This book talks a lot about getting over fear. Would you share just a little bit of your story?
Yes. When you come to Africa as a European, you encounter some things that are strange to you. For example, we were robbed one night. People would rob us and they had their machete and they wanted to kill us. And those moments of fear, of intense fear, nothing happened, but it was fear, entered my life. I didn't realize that you can receive a spirit of fear. The Word of God is very clear. It says, I do not give you the spirit of fear, but of love and of power and a sound mind. And so suddenly I got sick. I got so sick that I was actually rolling on the floor, screaming of pain.
Wow.
It was worse than having babies.
Wow.
Later I had 4
Well,
children.
that's saying
So
something.
it was worse than having babies. And I had fever, high fevers. And the doctors examined me and they said, sorry, you're fine. You're perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with you. And I didn't understand. And then I asked the Lord. And I said, God, what is wrong with me? And he said, you have allowed yourself a spirit of fear that is tormenting you. And the moment I heard it, I went on my knees and I said, in the name of Jesus, spirit of fear, you have nothing to do with me. Get out of me. And it was gone. And I was free. After that, we went into much more difficult encounters than those first robbery, that we encountered. And I had no fear. I was so sure that God protected me. And I gave this book then, when we wrote it, to a businessman. I didn't know he had a spirit of fear. And I gave it to him, and he said he never read a book in his life, and he read it in one night. And he said, when I came to this point, I can be set free of fear. I knelt down. I looked, what did Gaby say? And I said, in the name of Jesus, devil, go from me, fear, depart. And he was free.
Wow.
And he gave it to his mother-in-law, who had a spirit of fear. And so he passed it on to every person that he knew. And he said, they were all set free. So let us be free of fear. It's a spirit that is around everywhere right now.
And particularly
and
in
panic attacks, they are the same. Don't be in panic and don't be in fear. You can be free.
Wow, that is an incredible word. So we're going to put the where you can get this. We're going to put the name of the book and up at the bottom of your screens. And I really highly recommend just listening to Gaby. There's so much. I would love to interview you for hours and hours and hours. We don't have that time. But just thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much for coming to South Africa and just being such a blessing. It's really so super encouraging.
Thank you. Thank you, South Africa, for inviting me.
So we formed this coalition called the Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation South Africa. And we asked all the organizations, the trafficking, whoever you are, if you're involved in the fight against this, to be part of the coalition. And so we can all work together. That's all it is. That's all it is. There's nobody leading it. There's no hotshot. There's nothing like that. It's just a coalition so that we can all help each other. Because what I found is some people have good research and good data or whatever, and they can share that with others. So we are on an email group, and we talk to each other where you just, you answer to everybody on the group, and everybody speaks to everybody else. And so we keep everybody on the same page, and that way we can help each other to take this thing forward and share critical information as well. A lot of us, sometimes we have information, we use it, we don't share it with others, and perhaps they need it. And that's what we want to do. I think together we'd be a lot more powerful than just operating in our own silos. And every organization can operate under their own name, but when we come together, we CISA, a Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation South Africa, and we in turn connected to the international Coalition to End Sexual Exploitation. They're based in Washington, D.C., but there's a number of international organizations that's part of it. Great organization, which we're going to get a lot of help from. We're working to bring Clay Olson down from Fight the New Drug. He's so successful at reaching young people with this message of porn, the dangers of porn, the addictions and all of that. We're going to bring him down here. We're going to arrange to reach as many youth as possible. We're going to use our television programs, radio programs to reach out to people. But the way we're fighting this, it's a three-pronged thing, and I'm ending with this, Chantal. It's pornography. We're going to put a lot of effort into get a legislation in place to get pornography off the internet, to get it off television, to get it off. We started on this in 2009, Clive Human and I. We met with the then Deputy Minister of Home Affairs, which was Malusi Gigaba. He agreed with us. We had a piece of legislation, and the President appointed him Minister of Public Enterprises. We lost him, but he's back now as Minister of Home Affairs. And so we have to take this thing up again. So we have to get legislation in place, and I think the time is good now to do that because there's overwhelming evidence of the harm of pornography. So that's the one thing, pornography. The second thing is the prostitution thing. We must, at all costs, stop the decriminalization of prostitution in South Africa, right? We've got to keep it illegal, and we've got to get exit programs. We've got to put pressure on government. And as an organization and working with the churches, we can make that happen. Get the exit programs, get the women and children out of sexual exploitation. That's the responsibility of a decent government. Okay, then, and the final one is comprehensive sexuality education. I'm sure you know what this is. They're trying to get it in our schools to sexualize our young children, to teach them bizarre, dangerous, high-risk sexual behavior, normalize it. And we can't normalize these things. We cannot allow this thing to happen. So we're fighting those three battles as Family Policy Institute, and in the coalition, we're asking your help, and we're there to help you. Always remember, whatever you need, we got television, we got radio, we got access to pastors. You can call me, come see me. I'm there to help you. I'm there to serve you, because we're all in this fight together. Amen. Thank you. God bless you.